So let's get started by creating a new presentation sheet and putting some model views on it. We can learn a bunch of new techniques that way. So I'm going to go roll over sheets. I'm going to right click on that and create a new sheet. It'll still be our custom presentation sheet for this exercise. I'll click OK and we have a blank sheet. Let's go ahead and rename it right away. So I'll click on it and then I'll right click on it and rename. And that's hard to see. There we go. Rename, and we'll call it rendering. Rendering views. Maybe rendered views should probably be better. I'll just say rendered. Yeah. Rendered views and click OK. We don't have any views right now, so let's go ahead and create them. And we're going to create camera views. Give us a little bit of perspective and a little more information about the way our model is constructed from the viewpoint of a person standing on the sidewalk, so to speak. So we're going to go to the site plan, which gives us an overall of the site, obviously, so we can see our building. We're going to add sidewalk later on, so it'll be important to be able to come back to this site view when we want to make our camera views. And I'm going to click on the 3D view and grab the camera. And the camera is, the first thing you do is you drag it on and click it to where you want to stand, and then you drag it to where you want to look. So how close you are to the building creates how dramatic the effect is. The further away, the less dramatic. The closer, the more dramatic. So I'll start fairly close, and I'll click and drag, and I want to make sure I go completely past the model, so I include everything. And you'll notice everything isn't in that crop box, and I'm going to scroll out so we can see that. But that's all right. I can actually expand this crop box. And now we have a view that's really ready to be placed on the desktop, or excuse me, on the presentation sheet. So I'll go to the rendered view sheet, and that 3D model view that we've just created, I'll drag it onto the sheet. Now, a couple of things we want to change. We don't want it to say just 3D view. So I'm going to right click on this. It's always a little bit tedious, but it's a great habit to get into. It really helps when you come down to presentation. We'll call it rendered model view 1. And you'll notice it's not really very significant on the sheet. Let's say we want it to be larger. So the technique to do that, in order to make that larger, is to select it, go up to, excuse me, I'm a little confused here. I've got to select it. There we go. I must have not selected it. I want to go to size crop. And very important, and we'll go through this a couple of times, but this is always a sticking point with many students. We don't want to change the field of view. We want to change the actual size of this. Right now it's 8 inches wide. So if we want to make it twice as wide, we're going to double that, basically double that number. But we want to do it by scaling. So we want to make sure we select scaling. And I'm going to go ahead and make this now 18 inches. Basically double, and click apply. And now we have a really big dramatic image for our screen or for our display. Now, let's go ahead and experiment with rendering this. So I'm going to go ahead and double click into it so it's activated. And we go ahead and select a realistic rendering. And then let's experiment a little bit with the graphic display options. This is a chance where you can set things the way you want, but I make a few suggestions. I always turn off the show the edges, and I tell you to smooth the lines. That's that anti-aliasing, so they don't look jagged. That gives the model a little more realistic appearance to it, I think. Obviously, shadows help. So let's cast some shadows and let some ambient shadows fall on our objects. We can adjust whether there is a sky or not. So we can go to the background and turn on the sky. And later on, this is an early rendering view. We're going to come back and add sidewalk and other things. So this view will constantly be updated as we work through our model. And then the other thing is we can actually adjust the lighting specifically as we might desire. So in this case, we may want the sun to come more from the left-hand side. So if I hit apply, now the building gets very bright on that side. So I use the lighting tool And during lighting, you can, if you set the solar study thing for lighting, you can place the sun just at one position for you. And so that's a good rendering setting. Now, this is where I want you to pay particular attention. What we're going to actually do is we're going to actually save this template because we're going to create some other views and we want them to all be rendered identical. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to save this as a template, and I'll call this rendering. I'll call it rendering 1 in case we make another style. And I'll click OK. It allows us to change any of those things if we want, but we're going to actually leave them because we're happy with the way that is. And we're going to click OK, and we're done. Now, we may want to adjust this cropping here. I noticed that this is very low, so when I drag this back on, I'm going to have a title bar in the way. So I'm going to double click back on this. I want to make a little bit of an adjustment for mine. You may not have this same problem. Give me a little extra room underneath it. I'm going to deactivate this view and go ahead and delete it and drag it back on again, and that'll put the title bar nice and neat underneath it. Another technique I think is really important to enhance how it looks on a sheet is to get rid of this little line around the edge. So if I select it, you'll notice that it has a crop region visible. If I click that off and hit apply, when I click off of this, this is now no line is around the outside edges. So it sits on the page a little more comfortably, so to speak. Let's add 2 other images to this, and we'll call this a complete presentation sheet. So once again, I'm going to go back to the site, and let's say I'll pick another view. I'll pick a 3D view, camera angle from the other side. I'll go a little bit further back so there's not as much dramatic perspective change, as you'll notice. Let's crop it nice and tight. Let's add our rendering style. We probably could have modified the rendering style to not have that crop box showing. So I'm going to make sure I turn that off now. And that's now called 3D view. So let's go ahead and rename that. Rendered view 1. Or excuse me, rendered view 2. I'll leave model out. And we're ready to drag that onto the sheet. So I'm going to go to the rendered views on name sheet, and I'll drag that on. And you'll notice it's quite tiny. So let's go ahead and make an adjustment to it. So I'm going to go up to size crop. And let's say we want it to be about twice the size. Once again, so instead of being 5, we'll make it 10 inches. I'll hit apply and see what that looks like. It looks pretty good. I'll drag it over and see what it looks like. Great. So now I'm going to delete it. I'm going to drag that view back on again. Line it up with that other title block. And there we go. We have another viewpoint. All right, so let's create one last viewport up here. We'll go back to the site. We'll grab our view tool, our camera tool, should I say. We'll pull back on our building here a little bit and come on with a straight on look at it. And we'll see what that looks like. And once again, we'll pull this so we get everything we want in by adjusting our crop box. We'll add the same rendering of the template that we created. I might want to have a little more sky and a little less ground plane. And I want to center the amount of cropping on each side of the building a little bit. So I think we look pretty good. Let's go ahead and rename that view. Rendered view 3. And we can go back to our sheet and drag that on. And we want it to be the same size as the one below here. So let's go ahead and go to size crop. We'll set for scale. And the last one we made 10 inches wide, so we'll make this one 10 inches wide. Click OK. See how that's going to look. I think that's fine. I'll delete it and I'll drag it back on again. And we'll let our little bit of screen hinting help us out here for placement. And there we go. So we have our first presentation sheet constructed. So I'll break here. That's been a long ways going through all of those rendering steps. And we'll look at now recreating this sheet in a sketch mode. Well, once again, though, I want to make sure I hide that crop region visible. Give it a nicer look on the sheet.